Hijab is a way of being, and maybe I don't love it all the time. Maybe sometimes it's really hard, but I'll do it because I love you, and because I know you would never ask me to do something that would be harmful for me. This might be a bit vulnerable, but if I wasn't born into a Muslim family, would I have been Muslim? For a long time, I really struggled with that because deep down I felt like maybe no.
We built this set of thoughts and we don't challenge them often.
What is faith if doubt doesn't exist? A person feels like, am I a bad person, or am I a bad Muslim, or do I just not understand things? Is there something wrong with me that I'm having these thoughts? Grappling with that can be really heavy.
You wrote your dissertation, you called it visible yet unseen. What does that mean to you?
The hijab does not legitimize a person's Muslim identity, but this is how I see myself as a Muslim woman, is I'm so visible through my hijab, yet nobody really sees anything beyond that. There's a gap in the literature in terms of understanding Muslim women's experiences in the West, specifically in the United States, and how those experiences relate to their overall mental health and their well-being.
There is clearly a lot of damage on Muslim women's mental health. Where do Muslims start in fixing this damage?
So I'm going to answer your question as a Muslim woman. I can't tell Muslim women what to do or not to do, but what I figured out and what gave me a sense of ease and a sense of peace is that
a big chunk of this conversation is about Muslim women. And in particular, it's about the mental toll that being a Muslim woman has on them. And it's also about the research that Dr. Batul had done on Muslim women, on if religiosity serves as a protective shield for these women. And obviously, just like all episodes, we talk about various different topics. But at the end of this conversation, I looked back and I said, this was one of the most profound conversations that I've had on this podcast. Even as a Muslim man, listening to this conversation, it changed my perspective on so many things. I believe that you can feel what I'm talking about through the camera. Whether you're listening to this conversation or watching it, this is going to be one of the most important conversations that you can possibly listen to. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and giving this podcast to listen. I want to remind you that the only way this podcast can grow is with your support and with your help. And the free and easy way to support this podcast is to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, comment, give me your thoughts, let me know what you learned from this episode. And with that being said, let's get the show started.
Welcome aboard Middle East Airlines.
والمتوجهة إلى
طيران الشرق الأوسط يرحب
مدينة تونس العربية.
Dr. Batul, welcome to Not From Here.
thank you.
We start this off every single time with self-reflection. And the most physical form of that is looking yourself in the mirror. So when Dr. Batul does that, who is that?
That is such a thoughtful question. I can think of a lot of labels, right? So, woman, psychologist, daughter, sister, Muslimah. But underneath all of that, what's real is what I see is a soul trying to understand itself. Yeah.
That's a first. That's the first time someone answers like that. Usually, I would say 90% of guys say the labels. I'm a sister, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, this profession, that. But a soul trying to find itself,
Understand
itself.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
I feel like that's my life's work, Honestly, everything I do comes from a place of really trying to understand myself. And that's the way that I've always found myself getting close to my creator. I've been I'm here and I wonder, why am I here? What am I? What is this? What am I doing? What is the point of all of this? And a lot of, everything I do comes back to that. Trying to understand myself has been kind of the gateway to my life's work and everything I do.
How has that journey been?
A very real, very long, even though I'm still quite young, painful at times. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult journey, one of self-discovery, because you have to be honest with yourself. And we all have parts of ourselves that we hide from, or maybe it's difficult for us to sit with those parts of ourselves. So it can be painful, right? Because the labels, right? You mentioned labels, and most people fall back on labels because labels are easy, right? I know what it is to be a daughter. I know what it is to be a Muslim person. I can look at other people, and that's how I define myself. But what is underneath all of that? For example, a question I've always asked myself, this might be a bit vulnerable, but if I wasn't born into a Muslim family, would I have been Muslim? And for a long time, I really struggled with that because deep down I felt like maybe no. So what does that mean for me? What does that mean about my soul? What does that mean about myself? What does it mean about this world? And anyway.
Do you think the answer would be no?
The answer I've answered for myself is no. I mean, but then it's like, that gets at like qadr, right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadr. Like that for me, and like this relationship I've cultivated with my creator is that he knows me better than I know myself. And so I wonder if, he fashioned my life in such a way because he knew what my soul needed in order to find him. I don't know what my journey would have been like with Islam, or even with the creator of the world, if I wasn't born into the world that I was born into, if I didn't have the parents that I had. And grappling with that can be really heavy.
It is, and there's I feel like one degree of honesty, but then this is a different level of honesty. I think we all want to say that we would have found the truth eventually, but this is a cutthroat, honest answer. What you're saying right now is that you don't know if that would be the case.
Yeah, one thing you'll find with me always is honesty.
How do you rationale that with yourself? Because you said you're on this journey of understanding yourself. So what does that tell you about yourself?
What does it tell me about myself that I'm on this journey of self? I think what it tells me is that I'm human. Honestly, I think that most people, if you really get down to it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with this fitrah, right? And one of the best ways I'm able to connect with that idea is looking at children, right? In their purity and their innocence, and children are just curious. They're a jumbled ball of emotions, and their prefrontal cortex isn't developed. Nothing is really fully developed, but they're so real. And so for me, what it tells me is that I'm human. And I think what oftentimes happens is as we get older and we develop, we can sometimes lose that sense of connecting with this fitrah, connecting with the deeper part of ourselves, connecting with the soul. We get lost in the labels, For me, it's been, like I said, a long journey to finding myself, and that journey is never ending. But I feel I have a good grasp of myself now that maybe I didn't 5 years ago or 6 years ago, 10 years ago.
You mentioned curiosity, and it just sparked this bulb in my head that we stopped being curious. Now that I look back at my thoughts and the conversations that we're having. It's like we built this set of thoughts, and we don't challenge them often, right? It's what we're told to do, or yes, we're a big part of us, we follow.
Yeah.
And we don't take a step back and be children and be curious, because I think a lot of times when you're curious, you're challenged and you're looked down upon. Like there's this very set belief that we all have, and I just come to Batul and I throw that at you, and it's against the norm, and it's just me being curious. You might be like, why is he having those type of thoughts? Like, that's not what we think. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, internally I've always pushed against this idea of being boxed in or being told what to do, or being ascribed certain thoughts. And in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to be curious, to ask questions. And yet, for some reason, culture frowns upon that, and in a lot of ways hinders asking questions. If you ask questions, I mean, even as a professional, right? I have a PhD, so I'm supposed to know a lot of things. And somehow it's like, if I ask a question, or if there's some kind of, there's this expectation that I need to know everything. And I really push against that. My PhD signifies that I know a little bit about a very small area of expertise, but like in a broader sense, in our culture, we don't really, I don't think we, what's the word? Encourage curiosity, because there's so much fear. There's so much anxiety. Like, oh, if I'm curious, or if I let myself explore, do I want to wear hijab or not? Or what do these Islamic ideals mean to me? If I ask questions, that's perceived as, oh, you're straying. You're going against the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right. And a verse of the Quran that comes to my mind when I started realizing this is Prophet Musa alayhi salam asked God to show him how to resurrect the dead. And then God asked him, and this is me paraphrasing, like, do you not believe yet? He was like, I do, but I just want to be content, between me and myself. So if the Prophet is having this conversation with God, and it's not about doubting God, it's about like this, the soothness of the heart. So why is the Prophet allowed to do that with God, but when we do it, it's frowned upon?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't. I mean, all we have is each other. So if I'm thinking about these things, there's nowhere to go except the other people that are around me. And it's sad that people frown upon that and say you're straying, or oh, this guy's losing the path. He has these types of ideas. It's hard.
Yeah. It's so hard. And, you talk about doubt, but it's like, what is faith if doubt doesn't exist? Like, I can only get to faith through doubt. I have to let myself doubt and kind of really delve into that, and then choose to have faith anyway, right? Like, it's faith without doubt. I mean, that for me has never really worked, right? Like, in my mind just doesn't, I can't do the blind following. I can't do this is just the way that it is. And alhamdulillah, I was really blessed to have a family. My father really cultivated the sense of curiosity and allowing me to ask questions. And, but unfortunately, like you said, it's really not, it's frowned upon oftentimes. And then a person feels like, am I a bad person, or am I a bad Muslim, or do I just not understand things? Is there something wrong with me that I'm having these thoughts?
Yeah. You wrote your dissertation and you called it Visible Yet Unseen. What does that mean to you?
That means that's the way I see myself, right? That the way I see Muslim women, that we're so visible through our hijabs, and I should say, not all Muslim women wear hijab, and there's equally, there's no validity or invalidity. The hijab does not legitimize a person's Muslim identity, but in the way that this is how I see myself as a Muslim woman, is I'm so visible through my hijab, yet nobody really sees anything beyond that, right? So that's another label that people put on me and cast a bunch of ideas and stereotypes about me, yet they're really not seeing who I am.
When you first wanted to start working on this big project, we were chatting a little bit before we started, and you said it took you around 2.5 years to complete this. So this is not something simple. How do you come up with this idea? How are those conversations with yourself about, okay, what am I going to do now?
Well, research builds on itself. So a big part of conducting research is looking at what's been done. And there's this idea also in research of doing what's called me search. A lot of researchers will find themselves gravitating towards areas of study that they see themselves in. So for me, when it came time to, hone in on a dissertation topic, I had done some other kind of research studies on Muslim women and how, perceptions of Muslim women and the hijab and what have you. So, but when it came time to, deciding on my dissertation topic, I found that, there's a gap in the literature, honestly, in terms of understanding Muslim women's experiences in the West, specifically in the United States, and how those experiences relate to their overall mental health and their well-being. So that was really my main motivating factor. And from that, I delved into the existing literature and built a case for my study.
Did you have experiences about this certain subject matter personally as a hijabi before?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, so the idea I was looking at experiences of discrimination that have been experienced by Muslim women and how they relate to their overall sense of well-being, and whether religiosity serves as a protective factor for that. And yeah, I absolutely have had a wide range of experiences with discrimination, from, verbal to, the extreme end even as well.
Because we think, if this is the general notion, that someone's more religious, they're more armored and shielded by this religiosity against discrimination and negativity in general. And that's what you were challenging. That's what you wanted to find out.
Yes, because there's research that says basically what you're saying, but that research has looked at Christian populations, and there was at the time a study that had come out kind of challenging that a little bit and saying that for Muslims, if they have stronger religiosity, that might actually be a harmful factor, because the source or the root of the cause of discrimination for them is their religious identity. So, for example, Black Americans that experience racism, they're Christians, and so their religiosity can serve as a protective factor, but they're part of the majority group as Christians. As Christians, they're not discriminated against. They're discriminated against based on their race. But for Muslims, you're being discriminated against for your Muslim identity. So the idea that this paper was kind of challenging was that, no, for Muslims, being more religious can actually harm you. And I was kind of challenging that.
Okay. So before you ran the numbers, what did you expect to find? Did you expect to find that, or right before you started and you had your sample size, you were going to go for it? What did you expect the results to be?
Well, my hypothesis had to be based on the existing literature, and there wasn't enough literature to support one way or the other, so I had to kind of leave it open. So I you might remember better than me because it's been years since I reviewed my dissertation, but I hypothesized that it could kind of go either way. Although internally I had an idea based on my own experiences, but that's kind of where you have to hold your personal bias as a researcher and not
What was
let
that idea though?
Personally, that it would serve as a protective factor, based on my own personal experience. But, you know, you have to hold your personal bias as a researcher. You can't, as much as you can, you have to not let that influence. And so I tried not to, but internally I had this idea based on my, like I said, based on my own experiences, that despite experiencing these acts of discrimination, it was actually my connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my connection to the religion, my connection to my community that actually helped me cope, right? It wasn't something that deterred me further.
When you got the results, were you surprised?
A little bit, but maybe not for the reason you're expecting. So when I got the results, they were non-significant, meaning that I couldn't prove either hypothesis in either direction, which basically I had some issues with my study. I started it right before COVID, and then COVID hit, and it had a big impact on my ability to gather data and have enough participants. I did have enough participants, but there were some issues with like diversity of the pool. So I had quite a few, like it was skewed in one direction of people that were more religious. And so when I tried to run the data analysis, like it was not significant, meaning that like religiosity has no impact, but that's not true, right? Research shows that that's not true. Religiosity has an impact, but I didn't have enough of like a diverse range of participants to actually prove that with the numbers. Yeah.
Okay. So the direction that it showed was the more religious, the more discrimination. Correct?
Yes, but the less religious also reported, this was what was really interesting. People that were lower on religiosity also reported discrimination, but the source of discrimination they reported was from within the Muslim community.
So the more religiosity, the more discrimination from outside, the less religiosity, more discrimination kind of from the inside.
Exactly. And you know what else was correlated? Hijab. So more religious reported that it was correlated with wearing the hijab, and less religious was correlated with not wearing the hijab. And which is also correlated with, again, the source of discrimination, which I think says a lot about some of the issues we have within our community and the way we kind of interact with people based on their appearance and how we kind of judge them for the way they show up.
It shows you that it's detrimental.
Very much so, right? Like, I mean, hijab is fadl. It is, something we have to do as Muslims, but it's also, I mean, it's a deeply personal, spiritual thing. And the way we interact with people or with women that do or don't wear it, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. That's the way I see it.
So, okay, I'm curious. More religious, more discrimination. Does that make the person more religious after that, or does it lower his religiosity? Like, does discrimination push people away further from the faith, or does it bring them closer? So I could be going through a difficult time. I'm being discriminated against. I could either say, this is a sign I should stay hold and firm, or it could be a sign of, I need a break. That's exactly
the question of my study, right? So is it a protective factor? Is it something that brings me closer, or is it a threat where it brings me further away? In general, I will say religiosity has proven to be a protective factor. Okay. It is something that brings you closer. The more religious you are, the more it will provide a buffer against any kind of negative or harmful life event, including discrimination.
Okay. What was the form of distress that these women were going through? Like, was it anxiety? Was it numbness? Like, what were they going through the assessments?
Depression and anxiety, symptoms of both depression and anxiety, which can include, for depression, feelings of sadness, lack of motivation, even like suicidal ideation. And anxiety can include, worry, restlessness, an inability to like calm down and like stay grounded, overthinking constantly, like active nervous system. Those are some of the symptoms, that were reported.
I want to jump into the second part where you said if someone's less religious, they get more discriminated against within the Muslim community. And for the most part, people listening are from within the Muslim community right now. So what are things that you suggest? How should someone deal with that? I don't know. Like, do people have to go out to people that are not as religious to make them more religious? Do you leave them alone? Just let everyone be? I think that's kind of, I don't know. It's a question that everyone asks, I feel like.
And it's an important question. And I don't think there is one answer or a single equation that can be applied for every single instance. It's a balance, right? I'm not sure that I'm an expert enough to say, do this, and this is the right way to kind of go about interacting with people, that are less religious or not religious at all, or religious in name only. I will say a lot of people that are less religious or religious in name only, or it's kind of a cultural identity for them, or people even that convert out of Islam, right? If you hear their experiences, it's like they experience a sense of otherness. They don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they fit in. They don't feel like they're understood. And it goes back to actually this idea we were talking about earlier about questioning, right? This, like, if I have these questions, people look down on me. If I have these ideas, people look down on me. It's a lack of acceptance and judgment. So for me, I always remember an instance where I had actually mentioned this in at the conference that you were part of. I talked about this really poignant case that I had with a patient that I had worked with her for about 3 months, and 3 months in, at first she didn't want to work with me, and I didn't really have a sense of why. I just kind of got the sense maybe she felt embarrassed, or there was a stigma against, doing therapy. But after 3 months of working together, she tells me, actually, I'm Muslim, and I didn't want to work with you because I saw your hijab, and I just didn't feel like you would understand me. I felt like you would judge me. I felt that I wouldn't be able to be open. And I had no idea.
You had no idea she was Muslim?
No idea. I mean, this goes at my own biases, right? Her name was not a Muslim sounding name. She didn't wear hijab. And I just, for me, I was like, I treated her like every other patient that I work with, Americans that I don't, I try to relate to and hold empathy for and hold a space for, and just work through their feelings and not judge. And I had this moment of reckoning internally where I thought, oh my God, if I had known she was Muslim and I was hearing all the things she was telling me about a boyfriend and going out and X, Y, and Z, I don't think I would have been able to hold space for her.
Really?
Yeah, I would have felt like, I need to tell you, this is haram. I can't, no, like, what do you mean you're talking about, going to a party or this or that, or, and I always think to myself, like, subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he blinded me from this so that I could make space for her. And her telling me was a turning point in our relationship, in the treatment that we were kind of going through. Because then I was like, okay, so what made you tell me this now? And what's it been like for you being like, so I kind of turned it back on her because the treatment is about her. But I was also discovering a lot about myself and my own biases. And she said, you know, I just felt this, like, you were open and you were curious about me and you didn't judge me. And she would tell me things. She became very vulnerable with me. And then that got us into like talking about, okay, what have your experiences been with other Muslim women that wear hijab? And we really unpacked and processed her negative experiences with other Muslim women, even going back to her own family. And I think we worked together for about 7 months. And at one point I had done a workshop at the local masjid at the time of the area I was in. And she showed up and she was wearing hijab. She showed up at the masjid. And I, you know, for confidentiality, I didn't acknowledge her, but she came up to me. She said salam. And I said, wa alaikum assalam. And then in our next session, I said, I saw you at the masjid. And she said, that was my first time going to a masjid in like maybe 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe one of my favorite things about Whoop is how much different usages it has for me personally. So when I got it, it was a time of my life where I wanted to cut out distractions. I thought that getting notifications on my wrist 24/7 is weighing heavily on how I perform. And I always get distracted. And after my wrist pings, I gotta go check my phone, and that takes a lot of time away from me. So I kind of took advantage of that, and I started wearing Whoop because there's no distractions, because it'll never ping and it doesn't have a screen, and all it has to do is track my health, in which it does on a superior level to anything else. From my sleep to my recovery to my strain to every part of my health that I care about, it tracks all of it. And it can do the same for you. Because you listen to the podcast, Whoop wants you to try their product out for free. You go to join.whoop.com/notfromhere and they'll send you the Whoop. You try it out for a month. And after you feel what I felt about how much of a game changer this was to my life, you're not going to return it. But nonetheless, you can try it out for free. Again, that's join.whoop.com/notfromhere. And now back to the episode. That shows, I think, that when you do hold non-judgmental space, when you do allow the person to say what's on their mind, to be themselves, to open up freely without saying, we all have this feeling inside of us that we gotta tell them that this is wrong, we gotta tell them that they can't do that. That definitely, seeing her in hijab must have been for you like a shock on so many levels.
So many levels. I mean, seeing my patients outside is a shock to the system, outside of the therapy office. But yeah, I was not expecting that at all. I mean, and we had been talking about, at that point, she had told me she was Muslim and she identified and that she was born Muslim as well. But I kept holding space for her. It wasn't something that I said, okay, like, when are you going to start wearing hijab, or when are you going to stop doing these things? Or, and eventually on her own time, she did. And for me, I really took a step back and I thought, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he granted me the blessing of being the vessel for his healing. That's the way I see it. It was all I look at it every time I think back on it. I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all over it from beginning to end, honestly.
Those are moments that we live for, right? To do God's work. And it's not arrogance that you feel, but you feel proud that God said this is going to happen through Batul Rida.
Yeah, Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Like it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Because
It
if it was me,
through you.
exactly. If it was me and I would have known, I would have not been able to hold space for her. Batul, me reacted like, what do you mean you don't wear hijab? What do you mean you don't go to the masjid? Do you realize these are things you have to do? Do you, like, me would have harmed her. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the opportunity to help her in this small way. Alhamdulillah.
So let's take that back. How do you, through those sessions of you not knowing this person, what are the ways that you held space for her? Because even after she told you she was Muslim, you definitely still held space for her like you did before you knew she was Muslim. Because you realized at that point that, oh, I shouldn't really treat her differently. And if she trusts me to tell me that she's Muslim, she's going to trust me moving forward if I stay like I was. So we all have people around us that aren't the most religious, and we would love for them to find their way back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How did you do that?
It's a good question. It's how I do all of my therapy, honestly, which is try to hold space for where the person is. So the idea of therapy is that look, you cannot force a person to change. You cannot force a person to think a thought or to believe a belief or to do anything. You can maybe if you have power over them, you can, but you cannot touch people's hearts or people's souls by force. And I think back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Honestly, the way that he was able to deliver the message of Islam was through love and mercy. It wasn't through force or through forcefulness or, prescribing a certain way of being or through fear, right? I think we kind of lose sense of that. Therapy is about creating a space for people, for an individual to come and just really be vulnerable and feel like they're heard. You have no idea the power of feeling heard and validated. It can honestly be transformational, especially for someone that has never experienced that before, right? Like if I say this thought and I feel like you hear me and you understand me, so I'm not crazy. Okay, so now I'm more willing to explore and open up and really confront myself. Therapy is also about creating space for the person to confront themselves. It's not about validating everything, right? There are certain things where even with my non-Muslim patients, I'm like, okay, this behavior, this thing that you're talking about, you're doing, it's antithetical to your values. What's going on, right? So it's creating space for also accountability, but what precedes that is creating space for them to just express themselves. And that's what I did with her. And I continued, and it wasn't too hard because we had built a relationship by that point. And a lot of therapy hinges on the relationship. So if you have a good relationship with your therapist, that's actually, like, research shows that that's one of the biggest indicators of change, is if you have a good relationship with your therapist. So I just held space for her. And so the things she was dealing with were depression and anxiety. And so we had spent time like really trying to get into kind of the root causes of that for her, because it was a chronic thing. It wasn't something situational. Sometimes some people go through a certain life event or hard period, and so they experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. But for some people, no, it's more chronic. It's years of feeling this way, years of feeling like there's something wrong with me, or I have these kind of symptoms and I'm not sure what to do with myself. So yeah, I just continued holding space for her and space for her feelings. And
on a practical level, what does that mean? So if I come tell you, hey Batul, I drank and I partied and I screamed at my mom before leaving the house and I shut the door in her face and I left. What would you tell me what would you say for me to feel heard and to hold space for me? Like, what are the words that would follow?
I would say it sounds like you had a really difficult night. And I just sit with that. And then I would, prompt the person to talk about what was going on inside of you when that was happening, when you did those things. And then that to turn the focus inward and reflective, and to really get at some of the feelings and some of the like what was going on for that person. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah.
Because so you don't mention religion to me, even though I'm a Muslim. Like, I'm trying to think, what are the ways that we can make other people feel comfortable enough to open up and keep opening up?
So if the person is Muslim, I don't need to mention religion, especially if they see me, right? I'm pretty sure they get that enough from their parents and their outside circle and their community. What I really want to know is how you're feeling. I want to know, what are the things that happened inside of you internally? What are your internal wounds that led to this behavior? What happened to make you feel so disorganized or disoriented? Because, okay, if we're drinking, we think, like, let's actually talk about it, right? Most people drink or engage in substance use as a coping mechanism. Okay, what are you coping with? What are you struggling with? What are you struggling with that you feel the need to cope with, that you feel the need to numb out? I want to get at that. I can tell you this is haram and stop drinking, and yes, sure. But first of all, I'm not a religious scholar. I do hold a responsibility as a fellow Muslim, but for me, the way I hold it, it's a balanced approach, right? I'm not those behaviors are symptoms of a deeper issue.
What is it about expressing myself? And I think one sentence that I kept hearing these past 2 days at the conference is, hold space, hold space, hold space. What is the rationale behind me expressing myself and saying how I feel, putting it out there, that makes me feel so much better, and that makes me feel I can open up?
There's this idea, one of my old mentors mentioned, which is that one of the basic human needs, the soul, is to be seen, to be experienced, and to be witnessed. And it's really, like, if you think about it, it's a really profound thought, because when we struggle, like, imagine one of the biggest struggles a lot of youth go through, for example, is loneliness. We feel lonely. Loneliness is this feeling of not being understood, not being seen, not being heard. This results in this extreme loneliness. And we are all, I mean, just by the nature of this world, we're all lonely. We all experience loneliness to some degree. So expressing yourself self-expression is one of the ways that we kind of, is that it fulfills this need to be seen and understood, but it also is about connecting with others. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as social creatures. We're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to be isolated. And so when we hold space for someone in a therapeutic sense, you're holding space for their thoughts and their feelings, and in an unfiltered way, in a non-judgmental way. And that allows the person to then better regulate themselves, better understand themselves, and then show up in the way that they would like to in their other relationships.
Okay. So it's basically when you're very hungry and when you need to eat food, a lot of times before you get to the main course, you need maybe drink water, or it's like those stepping stones the to like the bigger needs. So it would fulfill that part. Okay, Batul made me seen. It made me feel like I was heard, felt like I wasn't crazy. Put that to aside. Now, okay, let me tell you what is really going on.
Yes, I love that analogy because I can take that and actually, when we're not seen, when we're hungry and we are in this state of like desperation, I'll eat anything, even if it harms me.
That's true.
Right? So, like, we all have this need inside of us, right? But if we're not getting it in a healthy way, we might turn to other ways to feel seen and to express ourselves and to be known and to be heard. And that can result in a lot of damage or issues along the line.
So is that why when you say visible yet unseen, is that why the unseen part is very important for Muslim women, for hijabi women also? That's why that's why the seen is important.
We're all unseen to some degree. And for me, doing that research in that way was kind of my own personal expression, if you will, in a research and kind of, academic way. But yeah, it's about bringing things out into the open. Even in an academic way, when things are overlooked, it can have a detrimental impact on the community that is overlooked, right? I mean, Muslim mental health is so important in a broad and very general sense. And then we talk about Shia Muslim mental health. It's incredibly important, but there's really no, it's the community is there, the need is there, but there is not, there aren't really mechanisms or institutions that operate in the same way as they do for, the broader American public. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
it does.
Yeah.
Do you think that all these debates on hijab, whether it makes a woman feel seen or not, whether it's oppressive of nature or not, do you think it takes away from the purpose, the initial purpose of hijab?
What do you mean?
I mean that hijab was intended to be a garment that a woman uses for modesty, but then maybe as a way, as a protective layer to shield her from the outside world in a way where she's safe from the gaze of men, for example. Does the debates of does that make it oppressive, or is the hijab oppressive, or no, you should take it off, or I feel seen, I don't feel seen, you're discriminated against? Like, I just wonder if we forget what the hijab initially is meant for.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I mean, hijab, this is the last step. Hijab is a way of being. It's about modesty. And it's prescribed to both men and women. Mm-hmm. But the physical manifestation, I cover my hair and I dress modestly. Men are also meant to dress modestly as well. But, people see this and then we do kind of tend to really focus on this physical element when really it's a spiritual concept. Mm-hmm. And the idea of it, the concept of it is such a beautiful concept, really. I mean, when I say like this is the last step, it really is the last step. But most people see it as the first step and the only step.
I think only is dangerous.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It is very dangerous because then it becomes something that's prescribed. It becomes something that lacks meaning. It becomes something that's kind of empty, and people then take it off. Like, why am I wearing this? Seriously, why am I wearing this? What is this about? It's about men. I don't care what men think about me. I don't care how men see me.
Only God can judge me.
Only
Those are the
God can judge me. Exactly. Okay. But if I have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I feel him and his presence all the time, that he is closer to me than my own jugular vein, and I talk to him like he is my friend, and I build a relationship of love, and I feel it, and I see it around me, I want to ask you, who's the person you love most in the world?
My parents.
Your parents. So if your parents ask you to do something that may be like, you're really not feeling it, but yeah, would you do it?
Yeah.
Why?
I have very high respect for them, and I wouldn't want them to be upset. They've sacrificed too much for me to they've given me so much and sacrificed so much that standing on stuff that are not as important, it's not the right thing to do, in my opinion.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That's, at least, again, I can't speak for all Muslim women in the world, but for me, it's like, I love you so much, and you've given me, it's not so much, you've given me everything. You've made me me. You've given me my parents. You've given me this beautiful world. You've given me the ability to think and to speak, to study, to learn. And you ask me for this one thing. And maybe I don't love it all the time. Maybe sometimes it's really hard to put it on, and to put it on in the right way that is modest. But I'll do it because I love you. And because I know, and I respect you, and because I know you would never ask me to do something that would be harmful for me. But I have that relationship, right? So it's about building, it's not something that's empty. When it becomes empty, then it's like, yeah, why am I doing this? So actually, when Muslim women start to question that, I think that's a really wonderful thing. Why am I doing this? What is the point of this? These are really good questions, but oftentimes it's like, if I hear this question, my daughter is asking this question, my sister, oh my God, what are you doing? What do you mean? No, this is haram. No, what do you mean? We all do this. This is we have to. No, make space for those questions. Why?
Even you saying that I don't like it all the time, even that first instinct is like, what are you talking about? You can't say that. You know what I mean? But I can definitely see how if a woman said, I really hate wearing this sometimes, it can be perceived as you're not allowed to say that.
Yeah. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. It is so hot over there in the summers. It gets over 90 degrees and it's humid. So yeah, there are many days I don't love wearing hijab. It's just on a practical sense, it's very hot. And then, just the difficulties you face being discriminated against and seen as othered, and it's not easy. But I have to accept, I can, if I can express that I don't always love it. I love it. I will say I love it like 98% of the time. So to be fair and accurate. But that was a journey for me as well. Again, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I didn't have the same exact relationship that I do have with it now. But making space for those questions, making space for that discomfort and the negativity is what allowed me to then come back to it with renewed purpose and passion and sincerity.
Do you think non-hijabi Muslim women even in some weird way feel even more of a burden because they go through all the stuff that Muslims go through as a minority, but even within the Muslims, they're also a minority.
Yep.
Where now they're like the minority and the minority and the minority. Although I don't know the numbers, but in like a general sense, they're looked as.
Yeah. You talk about unseen. It's unseen, right? And again, I can't really speak for their experiences, but from what I have understood through my research and my clinical work, and just hearing other women kind of share their experiences, is that there is this feeling of like being judged by others. And there's this feeling or this perception that they are less religious. So the way we measure religiosity is also kind of skewed, right? So what's your indicator for religiosity? Is it how many times do you pray? How many times do you read Quran? Are you fasting? Are you going to the masjid? Is it performative? Is it action-based? Or is it internal? Is it spiritual? Right?
That's a good question. How did you measure it?
I measured it looking at it was a mix of both. So I had some difficulty finding an accurate measure for religiosity for Muslims because this speaks to some of the issues with like the academic world and how they look at Muslims. So there's one scale, I forget the name of it, that is supposed to measure religiosity for Muslims, but in like every other kind of item, it puts instead of Muslims, it puts Arabs. So there's an issue there, right? Like being Muslim is not this, being Arab, this.
Yes.
So, I couldn't use that scale. So I had to find one that's that it hasn't been used with Muslims, so it was not validated on a Muslim population, but I believe with a Christian population, and I just edited some of the what's the word? The items, the items in the questionnaire, to have it be relevant for a Muslim population. And so it was a combination of action based and then also like kind of touching on the relationship one feels like spiritual connection with the Creator.
Because it's different from person to person. Your definition of, if I ask you how religious are you, could be like 8 out of 10. I can ask someone that doesn't do the things that you do, does way less. He says 8 out of 10. Because in their head, maybe just praying 5 times a day I'm very religious. If I fast in Shahr Ramadan, very religious. And it's difficult to measure.
Yeah, well, and then there's this idea of like religiosity and spirituality, right? So like, which I don't really love to get into all the semantics of it, that's besides the point, but like the kind of the action-based, the religiosity aspect, like what are you doing? And then the spirituality of like, how are you connecting the internal work? And I think sometimes some people, there is a disconnect, right? Like when there's a disconnect, like I'm doing things, but I don't feel it internally. I don't have a connection to the things I'm doing. That can cause a lot of problems. Even outside of religion, honestly, right? Like if I'm like, say I'm studying a certain career path, but I'm doing it because I've been told to do it. But I don't really feel a connection to it. I don't believe that this is important. I don't believe that this is a good use of my time. I'm not really interested in it. There is a disconnect, and that causes issues.
Palestine Drinks started off as a sadaqah jariyah, and if you don't know what that means, it's a sadaqah that is always in effect. The way they did that was they decided that 100% of the proceeds of this company will go straight to the people in need in Palestine. So every time you purchase and you support this brand, you are directly affecting people in need in Palestine. But they didn't stop there. They didn't think that was enough. So they created a product that is very high quality and really doesn't compromise on the taste at all. And now they're selling in North America. They started selling in North America. So you might start seeing this drink when you go to your grocery stores, when you go to the restaurants and gas stations that you love. You're about to start seeing this drink everywhere, and I can't recommend it enough. And now, back to the episode. So from all that we've described, there is clearly a lot of damage on Muslim women's mental health. And it's not one person's job to fix this. It's a community effort. It's a change in the perspective. Where does the community start? Where do Muslims start in fixing this damage?
It's a really good question, a really big one. I'm not sure that I can give a fulfilling answer because there's there are so many elements to this, because there's the community aspect, but then there's the family aspect, and the way that Muslim women are perceived, the way that they're raised, the way that they're, the expectations that are put on them, especially in the Arab Muslim community, culture plays a big role as well. So I think separating, or I guess distinguishing between culture and religion is incredibly important, right? A lot of the expectations that are placed on women are based in culture, but it's under the disguise of religion oftentimes, right? Okay, you have to get married at a certain age. You have to have kids at a certain, or after a certain amount of time of getting married. If you get divorced, that's a big no-no, right? And these are all a lot of different struggles that Muslim women go through. But I think what really, for me, what I would love to see is more spaces for Muslim women of all kinds of backgrounds, of all thoughts and ideas, to be accepted and to be able to express themselves in a way that's non-judgmental. I think of people that leave the religion. I think of people that take off the hijab. And I feel a lot of empathy, right? And I think that that's what maybe sometimes our community is lacking in, is empathy. And we cannot empathize with someone or something when we don't understand them. So you've taken off your hijab. How dare you? How could you? The reaction I have towards another person is a reflection of myself. So when I become angry or I become judgmental towards this person, what is that saying about me? What is that saying about my relationship with the hijab? What is that saying about my relationship with other people, right? I always love to remind myself that any person that you see in front of you, you can see yourself in them. You should be able to see yourself in them. And if you ever find yourself looking at someone and saying, oh God, I would never do that. Oh God, thank God I'm not like that person. Take a step back and ask yourself where that's coming from. Because, you could be in that person's position, and you might not have any idea how you got there.
You might be in that person's position.
Yeah, this person that you're judging, right? Where is that judgment coming from, right? When we see ourselves as better than others, or, oh, I would never do this thing. Okay. Maybe you wouldn't, but can we try to understand where this person's behavior was coming from? Oftentimes we see behavior and we just kind of label a person, or that's kind of it. We see the behavior and I now have made a judgment of you. That's your right, that's fine. But when we take a person based solely on their behavior, what we're doing is we're erasing this whole person, the soul behind it. I'm not saying to validate haram behaviors. I'm not saying to accept behaviors that are wrong. What I'm saying is, if we can take a step back and try and understand, where is this person coming from? Or another way to put it is in what ways has their soul been harmed in trying to express itself? Because again, we're all just trying to understand ourselves and express ourselves. Sometimes we do it in a way that's harmful to ourselves and maybe even to others. But where did that come from? What happened?
Because like you were mentioning about behaviors, okay, let's say I wouldn't have done that. I would never do this thing that this person did. I would never drink. Maybe that's true for the things that you've gone through, but do you know how would you have reacted if you've gone through the things that that person has gone through?
Exactly.
If you're going home to the stuff that they're going through, would you have done this?
Exactly.
And I think a lot of the times the answer that you're going to get is, I don't know if I would have done the same. Maybe.
Maybe.
It's not, I still would have never.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the maybe. It's holding that maybe. It's the question I asked myself, like, if I wasn't born into my family, would I have been a Muslim? You know, maybe not, right? If I was in this environment, would I wear hijab? Would I have done this? Would I be doing this? I don't know. When we kind of hide behind these labels and hold on to those as kind of a shield against our own humanity, that's where a lot of the disconnect happens.
What would your approach be to a woman that just took off her hijab? Because I think I don't want to call it a trend, but it's happening a lot nowadays. And some of these women have friends and family members that used to love her when she had the hijab on, but now she took it off, and they don't know how to feel about her anymore. They feel like, if I talk to her, that means I'm validating, and I'm gonna show her that, yeah, there's no problem that you did this, but at the same time, I love this person, I really care for them. So, and then there's a tear there in people, and it's a good intentioned tear. So how would you approach something like that?
It's a very difficult position. Let me ask you, are you asking me as a therapist, or are you asking me as a fellow Muslim woman?
Can we get two answers, as a fellow Muslim
Absolutely.
woman and as a therapist?
So as a therapist, I would hold space. And I know we keep saying that, but holding space is, okay, so if I've been working with this person for quite some time, you know, I would hope that wouldn't be a surprise to me, let's say. Like, I would hope that I had made enough space for her to be vulnerable enough to talk to me about her doubts with the hijab. If this is a new patient and she just took off her hijab and started, came to see me, I would try to explore, okay, yeah, what happened? And I might imagine that was really difficult for you. That was probably a really painful decision. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about your pain. Talk to me about the difficulty. Talk to me about the impact it's having on your relationships. There's a lot of grief and a lot of loss that this person is probably suffering in their relationships. So we have to make space for that so they're not further isolated from their relationships and their communities. Then talk to me about, okay, where's the disconnect been, right? Like, again, I've been wearing this hijab and I've been wearing it for X amount of years and I can't do it anymore. Okay, talk to me about that. Talk to me about the feeling of being suffocated and allowing her to just breathe a little bit and express her emotions. And without the expectation of getting her to put it back on. That would be really key for me. Like, I cannot, as a therapist, as any kind of person, I cannot impose any kind of expectations or conditions on, okay, I'll work with you, but, after a certain amount of time, come on, yalla, put it back on. No, it's therapy, and even like love, mercy, all of these things should not be conditional. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love for us and his mercy for us is not conditional. We can do, he says, just as long as, you will have to suffer consequences based on your actions, but as long as you believe in him, there's always mercy. There's always mercy. It's abundant, his mercy. It's everywhere. So I would try to tap into that as a therapist. As a fellow Muslim woman, it would really depend on my relationship with this fellow woman. I do have a close relationship, I think I would approach it in the same way, but I try not to be a therapist to people that are not my patients, just for my own self-care, and also, you know, to have like appropriate boundaries in my other relationships. But I would also try and understand what was like, okay, what happened, and if she was comfortable talking to me, and if we had that kind of relationship. And then I would ask, like, in what ways I can support what she felt
Keep it
like
at
she
that.
needed. Yep, keep it at that.
The thing about that is the decision of taking it off doesn't happen the night before.
No.
It's a decision that was made way before.
It's like, have you heard of the phrase like death by 1,000 cuts?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like these little things that add up and accumulate over time that suddenly results in this thing. So sometimes, like, people will say, even people that struggle with, for example, severe cases of depression or anxiety, they'll say, nothing big happened. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Nothing happened. But then when you spend enough time processing and making space for their feelings and really getting into it, you'll find that there is a long history of these little cuts that their soul has suffered over time. And then it's just like they got to a point where it just collapsed. So, you know, my kind of role would be to just make space for that, hold space for that, and allow the person to process and like go back and look at those wounds, look at it and see it for what it was, and, you know, kind of integrate that into their integrate that into their concept of themselves.
Wow. Yani from what you're saying, it's not your job to play police and make sure that they put it back on, even if it was a fellow Muslim sister. You just let them be, and if anything, not cutting them off, staying close to them.
Exactly.
Staying around them.
And let's just say I somehow convinced them to put it back on. Like, is that actually a sincere thing then, if they've put it back on through me convincing them? Who's to say, right? I think I will say this as well, that my role is not one of a religious scholar, right? So I imagine a religious scholar or a chaplain may have a different approach. And that approach is also quite valid and is very much needed in our community, right? To be very clear and to be very kind of prescriptive. But my role as a psychologist is not that. And what I'm trying to do with all of my clients is to get them to a place of empowerment and lasting change, right? So if I'm prescribing something to you, if I'm telling you to do something, or if I'm the one trying to convince you to do this thing, what happens when I'm gone? What happens when you leave my office? I mean, the person has autonomy. They can go find another therapist, you know? So it's not about the behavior. The behavior is a symptom. It's about getting to what's underneath, right? And really kind of working with that and what led us to this.
And another thing about that is you can tell someone or when you tell someone that or show them that you're dissatisfied, it's not going to get them closer. And when you validate, and I don't even want to say validate in this case, but hold space for them, the rationale of a lot of people is if I hold space for them, they're going to think this is normal and they think that there's no repercussions. But I really believe that if someone did a mistake, whatever the mistake is, they understand that it's a mistake. They understand that they did something bad. If you hold space for them or you don't hold space for them, it's clear. You know, we're adults, we understand. But and I don't care for you to understand when you're talking to me. I don't care for Batu to tell me, I know that this thing is bad and I did it. The thing that is important is when you go home at night before you sleep and you think about what you're doing, you do understand that these things are bad. So it's a net positive to hold space for people and to be there for them. But that's just the role on people that are on the outside. But what's your message? What would your message be to Muslim women in general?
Like a broad message?
Yeah, like we talked about what should the whole Muslim ummah do in a way to kind of make things safe as a safe space. But what should the Muslim woman do for them to be seen? Like through all the struggle, through the discrimination and through all of this. Even it would go for you because you said that you've experienced this to a certain extent, but I'm pretty sure that you found ways to cope with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what would Muslim women do in this visible but unseen world that they live in?
No one will see you as much as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. No one. So I'm going to answer your question as a Muslim woman. I can't tell Muslim women what to do or not to do to be seen, but what I figured out and what gave me a sense of ease and a sense of peace internally is that nobody will understand me or really know me as much as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will. And to cultivate that relationship and to hold on to it as, above all things. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then, He sees you and He will give you what you need. Maybe not what you want, but He will always find a way to give you what you need. For me personally, there is that, this is the internal, and then that translates to the external, right? So I wear my hijab as a reflection of my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I pray as a means to strengthen that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I read Quran to, get closer to Him. I have a friend that has talked about their relationship with the Quran as one that it's like a friendship, like the Quran being their friend. And I love that. It's all about the relationship you have and that you're able to cultivate internally with yourself to get you to the Creator. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us these means. Sometimes that can be hard when we are in situations or environments where, where we feel that we're not as connected because it's prescribed onto us, it's forced onto us, right? So what I would say is that whatever doubts you're having, whatever thoughts you're having, negative thoughts, bad thoughts, they don't make you a bad person, they don't make you a bad Muslim, they make you human. And that's you reacting to your environment. And, kind of those questions are valid. And to make space for yourself and be sincere with yourself. I always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, keep me sincere. Keep me sincere. That's it. I don't need anything else. Take everything away. Just keep me sincere. And if there's something that's going to, kind of jeopardize my sincerity, take it away from me. So it's that honesty and the sincerity with yourself, right? Like, okay, if I can make space for myself and I can make space for these thoughts and they don't make me a bad person, and I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's start there. Do I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do I believe that there is a Creator? If I don't, let me ask why. Right? Making space for doubt, making space for questions, just make space for yourself. You don't need anybody to see you. We've talked about people, Muslim women aren't seen and they're not. But it's not your job to go out and, holler and scream and force people to see you. No, your job is with yourself. The work starts here. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. And whether other people see you or not, if you're able to hold space for yourself and be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll be okay.
You know, that's a great way to put it. Ask God to keep you sincere. Because as you're saying this, I'm thinking between me and myself, that is what's important. If I'm sincere, that means I'm honest with myself. That means when I reflect, I know what's wrong. And when I know what's wrong, I can fix it because I'm sincere. So it all ties back to just being sincere with yourself.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about that is you don't need anyone else for that. You just need you and God.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow. What's one thing that we didn't talk about today that you think we should have?
There's a lot we could have talked about today. But we covered quite a bit.
Like, what are some closing thoughts that you think are important to say?
I'm thinking about what you just reflected on, actually, the sincerity piece and being honest. And, to go back to the idea of like Muslim women taking off their hijab, maybe that's the first time they're being honest. Maybe that's the first time they're actually being sincere. Sometimes when something is built on an unstable foundation, you have to take it down to rebuild it up again. So, but it can be very scary. It can be very anxiety provoking, to say the least, for the person, but also their environment, their family. I mean, it's not a small thing. And I know the impact, and I know kind of the ripple effect of that. And what the family members feel is also valid. Their fear and the anxiety, and maybe even anger, maybe frustration, betrayal, right? That's also valid. There's space for that too. But sometimes when we're not able to be honest with ourselves and to express ourselves in an honest way, that can cause a lot of damage internally and then can be expressed in these really harmful ways. And we didn't really talk too much, or we didn't delve too much into like the therapy aspect of it. I'm a psychologist. I believe wholeheartedly in therapy. And it's what I do for a living, but I don't believe everybody needs a therapist. But because think about, what does a therapist provide? What a therapist should provide is a space of unconditional mercy and unconditional acceptance. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides us. If we get that from other sources in our life, my mom, my dad, my friends, why would you need a therapist? People come to therapy because they don't get that anywhere else. Along with also suffering with mental health issues that are outside of the scope of their friends and their family and what have you. But the essence of therapy, the root of it, that's what it is. And so this might be a controversial take.
I was just about to say, you might get in trouble for that.
It's what I believe.
I agree with you. And the notion that we have to outsource it, it's good that it's available. There's good that there are professionals and experts that are able to hold these spaces. I'm pretty sure the mental and emotional burden on you and all other therapists is a lot. Listening to these problems and holding space and making people feel that they can be vulnerable. But I think we have to do a better job. And when our friends come and maybe they see that, or they try to open up, is to also being able to do that for other people. So realistically, not every single person can go to therapy.
Realistically, and also there are a lot of barriers to therapy as well. I will say a caveat to that statement of not everyone needs therapy. it's true. I do believe in that. But a lot of people do need it, especially, you know, when they've suffered trauma, when they've suffered, you know, when they're like certain disorders, like eating disorder, you know, chronic depression, when there's suicide or suicidal thoughts involved. Yeah, you do need a professional to hold that space for you, and so that you don't become a burden to your friends and families and loved ones, right? And a lot of people have that fear of, oh God, I'm a burden to my friends, I'm a burden to my family. If you're not seeing a professional, you might actually be one, right? So the space is important, and it's much needed. But some of the issues that I'll say, like, some of the issues that a lot of people struggle with come from a lack of unconditional acceptance and mercy. So we can really, I mean, kind of circumvent a lot of people's issues if there's space for them to feel like, I can go to this person and talk, or I can just be myself, and I can ask questions, and I can express my thoughts and my feelings and not be judged for it.
Right. You know that I know this conversation was mostly about Muslim women, hijab, but even here sitting, like listening to this, I feel like I've learned so much that I can go out and apply in my own personal life. And like you said, we could have talked about a bunch of different stuff, and I have no doubt that this won't be our last conversation.
Inshallah.
So I wanted to thank you.
Thank you so much for
Of
having
course.
me. I'm humbled to have had this conversation
Of course.
with you.
Thank you, and inshallah we'll do it again.
Inshallah.